it ain't too good. I mean, I done seen some rooms where I'm like, yo, this some pink puffy bullshit. I mean, Hello Kitty posters and very little, I'm afraid. Would you like to?
This morning of February 2050, the information that the Clementine II, a US trading ship, has been hit by missile during the night and all the crew on board has been killed is all over the world's TV and internet news channels. It is believed that Russia is the author of this attack, and there is almost no doubt that this event is taking part in the vivid tensions in the Arctic region. Yet, as the Clementine II is sinking into the Arctic deep black water, the Bering Strait crisis has been brought on a different level of conflict. Soon, all the TV and digital channel experts are debating on the legitimacy of such an attack, dividing blind support of the US agenda in the region and those who are accusing the US decision to block the Bering Strait from Russian and Chinese passage as the first act of aggression and the spark to this tension. But it is too early to condemn any state actor now, as the whole international community is holding its breath in waiting for an American response to this tragic event. In 2023, according to the estimations of many scientists, it is only a matter of time before the Arctic polar ice will almost be completely melted, leaving a vast ocean open to access during the summer period. The melting of the Arctic polar ice will then reveal new trade routes that will link Asia to Europe and North America. In addition, it is believed that this vast expanse of ice hides important deposits of fossil and mining resources. The Arctic region could therefore be invested in by world superpowers such as the United States, Russia, or even China. These powers have already begun to gradually establish themselves in the region. China is trying to muscle its way through the North Pole by using newly acquired icebreakers. Russia is consolidating its networks of search and rescue bases on the Siberian Arctic coast. And the United States is strengthening its alliances with the European states present in the region. It is therefore quite likely that the Arctic will become a new theater of conflict between these superpowers for the exploitation of resources and the monopoly of the use of trade routes. With an unseen proximity before between these supposed belligerents, it represents a serious fertile ground for possible escalations of tension. The Black Cygnet Society is honored to present a foresight scenario of a possible conflict between China, the United States, and Russia in the Arctic region in 2050. You can find more information, the full scenario, and the data used on our website, the Black Cygnet Society, and follow us on social media where we are posting exclusive content. In November 2050, a Chinese remote-controlled submarine ran aground the American coast near the city of Barrow in Utqiagvik. The inspection of the Chinese submarine by the American authorities then revealed a worldwide plan to prospect and exploit deposits of thorium, rare earth, and manganese nodules. These resources are used in the production of electronic devices and in the nuclear industry, but their exploitation is highly harmful for the marine fauna and flora. This plan could give China an almost monopoly over these energy resources. Following these revelations, the United States accuses China of violating American sovereignty over its sea territory. This violation is highly exploited by the American authorities as a justification to establish a blockade around the Bering Strait, blocking all trade between China and Europe. This blockade also allows the United States to continue its commercial activities using the Northwest Passage while prohibiting the passage of the strait to Chinese container ships. Immediately after the announcement of the American blockade at the Bering Strait, Russia acknowledges the militarization of its maritime zone, followed by strengthening of security on the Ronglo Island where few missiles have been placed. China then tries to seize the General Assembly and the Security Council of the United Nations. However, no solution is found due to the veto rights of the United States, a permanent member of this council. The international community is therefore in an impasse. Therefore, without hope of any diplomatic solution, Russia, supported by China, decides to engage in a direct armed conflict with the United States. The first ship to sink, hit by a Russian missile, was the trading ship, the Clementine II, leaving the port of Clarence for the port of Osaka in Japan. Unfortunately, a few American engineers and sailors were present on the ship for piloting, monitoring, and maintenance of the cargo. In retaliation for this loss of life, the Americans launched one of the biggest cyberattacks on Wrangel Island, infesting and freezing all connected devices on the island. This attack was followed by a mobilization of a large part of the American Navy in the Arctic Ocean, concentrating the action on the Denmark, Iceland, and Norway regions and securing the American and Canadian coasts. China then responds to this act of aggression with cyberattacks, with the same type of virus as Stuxnet, freezing all operation and all communications of these platforms. American rescue ships are no longer able to reach these platforms due to the lack of distress signals, GPS information, and atmospheric disturbance due to the winter weather of the Arctic region. From this situation, and because the European and Chinese markets are very interdependent, the European Union is distancing itself from the American strategy, but is trying to be the voice of diplomacy and is engaging in a diplomatic discussion with the Americans on the lifting of the blockade and the withdrawal of the American Navy from the international Arctic waters. But the discussion between the EU and the United States ended in an impasse. The United States notably accuses Russia for territorial violation and China for cyber attacks resulting in loss of life. These represent an acute trauma for the American authorities who have maintained a foreign policy with a very few victims in 30 years. Without a diplomatic solution, the European Union decided to deny the American access to the exclusive DEN zone and to let Chinese and Russian ships sail in these waters. In addition, the Icelandic government decides to close the American military bases present on its territory. The European decision represents a new break with history because the United States has always been a traditional ally of the European Union. As a last resort, China, supported by North Korea and Russia, is launching a vast cyber attack against American escort cruisers and submarines, which continue to accompany missile ships and submarines present in the Arctic waters. By taking control of the American ships, the Chinese threaten to cause a nuclear accident by using the American arsenal. Due to the critical nature of the Arctic situation and the growing movement of popular protest against the actions of the United States, a coalition of 20 countries seizes the United Nations. Finally, the United States is ordered to withdraw all its military ships from the Arctic Ocean as well from the Bering Strait. What kind of lessons can we draw from the Bering Crisis? The hypothesis of a conflict in the Arctic region in 2050 informs us first of all of the major importance that the region will represent in the coming decades for the international geopolitical scene. Indeed, the Arctic region will be considered a fertile ground for interstate tensions due to the many resources that can be guessed under the ice floe. The hypothesis of a Bering Crisis must be used to sensibilize the states and the international institutions to pay close attention to the action of the superpowers in the region, particularly China. Indeed, the latter worries many intellectuals and observers because of its attitude on the geopolitical chessboard. The territorial claim of the Middle Kingdom in the South China Sea against many archipelagos attest for a certain expansionist strategy. The important thing is therefore to ensure that this expansionist and imperialist attitude, which is not only a Chinese characteristic, does not translate into the waters of the Arctic Circle. Thank you for watching this video. You can subscribe to the Black Cygnet Society channel and follow us on social media. If you like this content, if you're interested in foresight, forecast, in the future of our societies and want to be part of the project, you can send us a message at the email address in the description below.